We're going to do it again. We've done this one other time so far, I think, or maybe we did it more than once, where we've decided to jump way, way, way back into horror history, and we're going back into the early days of Universal monster movie history, and we're going back to 1931, and we're talking about Frankenstein this episode.
Didn't we do a Dracula episode too?
We did a Dracula one, and I was trying to... I have to go back and do some digging. I thought maybe we did, like, Nosferatu?
I don't remember that one.
Maybe we didn't, though, right? Or maybe we just talked about Nosferatu during the Dracula episode. Maybe that's what I'm thinking of.
Yeah, that could be. Yeah, we're definitely going back into the time machine for this one. One of the... probably one of the staples and classic... what do you call this era? The 1930s era, the Universal Monster era.
Wasn't that the golden age of horror?
I thought the golden age was that was us more like 70s and 80s. Yeah, but either way, yeah, this was like the going back into when horror really started to become a thing for film. You know, the Universal monsters, and Frankenstein is one of those movies for, like, obviously just kind of like Dracula. For you and me, it was before our time in terms of when we were growing up. It was all about the slashers and the Freddy Kruegers and Jason and all that. And so this was like, you know, back in the black and white era. Like I remember watching Frankenstein on Svengoolie's show back in the early 80s as just a little kid. So that was probably my first introduction to it.
I wonder if Universal kind of was taking the playbook from Dracula when they made this one, because one of the first things that I noticed about this one when I started looking into it, when we were talking about doing a show about it, is that just like Dracula, even though there is a book that was written for Frankenstein by Mary Shelley, whenever that was, I don't know when that book came out. But this movie actually is based off of a play that was, you know, based off of the book, of course, which was the same thing that Dracula did, you know, because that was always one of the things with Dracula. The movie Dracula was based off of the play Dracula, which there was some differences between the play and the book, of course. And Frankenstein did the same thing, which I always thought was kind of interesting. So I wonder if when we get into some of the other later Universal movies, and even some of the other earlier ones as well, if that same kind of template is how they were doing them at the time. I mean, I know with Dracula, part of the reason why they did that way was, like we had talked about during that episode, was to kind of save on, you know, visual effects and stuff, because we'll just make it how the play is made, and then, I mean, we know how they do it in the play, so we can do that on film just as easy.
You know, they were obviously taken from the books, and later on this continued on. And actually, you know, it's kind of funny now. It's like it doesn't seem like that's a big thing anymore, where you hear about horror films or films in general being adapted from books. But for a long time, that seemed to be like the go-to. I mean, I think of like some of the blockbusters, like, you know, The Exorcist, that was adapted from a book, or Jaws, that was adapted from a book. So, I mean, it's kind of changed. You don't really, I mean, it happens still, obviously, but it's not quite as prominent as was back in the past.
Right.
But when I watch this movie, I want to say, first of all, it's kind of funny because they've been Universal. We talked about this in the past too, about, you know, they were trying to launch this dark universe where they were going to bring back the monsters, you know, the Frankenstein, Dracula, Mummy, all that stuff, and put this in sort of the modern era. They started out with the Mummy, and whether or not they started with a bad direction, you know, with the whole Tom Cruise action movie kind of thing, didn't work out. I don't know that these movies translate anymore. Like Frankenstein, I don't know if it would work again in, you know, modern day. Watching it, you know, and it's 1931 glory. It just seems like it's kind of a period piece. I don't know that you can really upgrade it. And one thing I want to say about this film, probably the big standout for me, that just watching it, was the atmosphere is amazing. I think they those old Universal movies, they do such a great job with atmosphere, like, you know, the old castles and the gloomy cemeteries and, you know, the mad scientist lab and all of that.
They did that one movie I think it was right around the same time that they came out with Bram Stoker's Dracula, whenever that was when was that? Like in the early 90s or whatever? And they did the same thing with this, where they did the Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, where Robert De Niro played the monster. I don't know if you ever saw that movie or remember that.
That, like, I remember it, but I do not remember, I did not see it or.
Right. Yeah. So because that's always one of the arguments that people have when it comes to, and the same thing was said true about It, that came out last year, when these people are talking about remakes, and, you know, the thing with these old movies is like Frankenstein and Dracula, the movies were based off of a play, and then when these movies come out 60 some years later, they're not really basing the movie that they're making then off of the original movie. They're actually, you know, like, those were based off of the book. Mm-hmm. So, you know, some people are like, well, they're technically not remakes, and other people are like, well, yeah, they are. So, but I definitely see what you're saying, to whereas if you actually tried to remake this movie, I don't think it would work at all.
Yeah, I think that's kind of like the reality is it's just the Frankenstein, Dracula, all of the you know, I guess you would say the Universal monsters. To me, in my opinion, I think their time has come and gone. They become so mainstreamed. Like, you and I talk about this all the time, like how our slasher characters, Jason, Michael, Leatherface, Freddy, and all that, have become like the new version of like the classic monsters, where, you know, you go into Walgreens in October and you can get, Jason decorations to hang up for Halloween. You know, it's like, it's become so mainstream now. You see a hockey mask. It's like, back when we were kids, it wasn't quite like that. But like, just like Frankenstein, I mean, like every, you know, elementary school has like, you know, hangs a little cartoony green-skinned Frankenstein up on their, you know, bulletin board or whatever, you know, in October. It's like, it's just so common now. This movie, it's kind of interesting because, like, the, you know, the flat head, the whole Boris Karloff design, the way it's designed, the way he looked in this film is really carried on, like, you know, and that's with the nuts in his, or the screws sticking out of his neck, and, you know, the stitches around his wrists and all that. And that's like, when you think of Frankenstein, this is pretty much what you think of. So it's kind of interesting thinking about that, watching it, you know, now, because it was like, yeah, that was, you know, that this is really what started all of that. And at one time, this was really, probably really terrifying.
Well, speaking of terrifying, there are a couple of things in this movie that, when you watch it now, and even probably when they show it on Svengoolie and stuff, because, I mean, I've seen this one on Svengoolie probably more than a couple of times over the past several years. But when they show it on Svengoolie, I don't even know if they edit anything out at all, really. They might do some, like, time editing to it. But there's a couple of things that happen in this movie that I would imagine, like, in 1931, probably made people, like, get sick in the theaters and, like, oh my God. Because I know, like, one of the things was with the monster. If I remember right, the first time you see the monster in this movie, like, he backs into the room or something.
Yeah.
So it's not so terrifying when he's revealed.
I thought that was pretty hysterical.
But in this movie, there's a scene where they show the man hanging, and they cut him down, you know, so you're showing a dead body just dangling from a rope. Mm-hmm. But then the other one, this other scene, I don't know if you'd necessarily pick up on it if you hadn't read the book, and I don't know if they went into any more detail on it in the play or not, but the scene where the monster is by the water and he's with the little girl and they're throwing the petals into the water, and then he's having a good time or whatever, and they run out of the rose petals or the dandelion heads or whatever they're throwing in the water. Mm-hmm. And so he picks her up and throws her into the water. In the book, and it's kind of implied in the movie as well that he killed her. So I always think those couple of things, like back in 1931, man, those had to be so controversial.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that, because when I was watching it last night, like that scene where, they're playing with the dandelions and then like they run out of petals, and so he picks her up and throws her in. Like they cut away from that, and then they cut into where he's in the water with her, and it looked like he was possibly like pushing her in or holding her head down or something.
Right.
And I was like, I don't remember that, because I just, I thought he just threw her in and like she drowned. Like they left it like that, but it seems like there was more to it, but they just obviously don't, like, it's not graphic or anything, so you don't really know how it went down. Obviously she dies, but that actually kind of surprised me. And then it was kind of funny because my son came in, my youngest son, he's 15. He came in when I was watching it, and he saw like the scene where the dad is like carrying the dead body of his daughter through the town. And he was like, wow, that's kind of disturbing.
And so when you think about it, and I don't even know, 1931, my grandparents were little kids at that time, but I mean, they're dead and gone. I don't even know who I would, could even talk to say, hey, so do you remember when, Frankenstein came out? Like my mom and your parents are, they're kind of close to the same age. I think your parents are a couple years older than my parents, but like my mom was 17 when The Exorcist came out, and because of the experience that she had with that movie when she was 17, even though now it's one of those movies that they could play on, network television without really, they would edit some language out, but other than that, they probably wouldn't really edit anything else really out. There's the crucifix scene they would probably cut out a little bit, but that movie, that terrified my mom, and, in 1974. So I can't imagine what this movie or Dracula or The Mummy or any of those did to people in 1931.
Yeah, I'm sure it did. It probably was pretty intense at the time, especially the reveal of the monster and the makeup and all of that. I really enjoyed this one, and one thing too about these old Universal monster movies is they seem to be relatively short too. I think this one only came in at like an hour and 10 minutes or somewhere around there.
Yeah, it's pretty short. Yeah,
I was pretty surprised about that. Yet they cost like, $4 or $5 on Amazon. Go figure. But but it was like I was pretty surprised. And also how tight the film was. And there wasn't a lot of drag time, like a classic movies. There's a lot of that in between time, like you're waiting for something to happen. And yeah, there's some of that here as well, but like it just seemed to kind of go rather quickly. So you never were like really sitting there like, what's going on? I thought, everything was pretty interesting and everything was pretty needed. It seemed like, I guess probably being an hour and 10-minute long movie, that's probably what you would expect, but I really enjoyed it. I thought Boris Karloff did a really good job as the monster. And when I think of Frankenstein, that's always what I think of, and his portrayal of it. The scene where he's laying on the slab, and the other doctor, not Dr. Frankenstein, but the other guy is like going in to dissect him or something, and then he's like reaches his hand out and kind of grabs him. That part reminded me of, I was like, you know what? I think about all the horror eras that came after this, and that scene in Friday the 13th, the final chapter, where Jason's sitting on the slab and his hands like hanging off the thing. It was like, Jason is kind of the Frankenstein of the modern, horror. He's like kind of this lumbering lug kind of guy.
Yeah, there's definitely some of that.
And also, too, like Friday 6, that's a total ripoff of Frankenstein when they revive him by, lightning bolt striking him back from the grave and bringing him back.
The most over-the-top scene, which is in my favorite Friday movie, but the scene that when you watch it now when you're 40 years old and you're like, man, that is such a dumb thing to do. Why would you not only dig him up, but then stick a lightning rod in his, or whatever it was, a fence post in his chest in the middle of a storm.
Right.
Not as bad as the opening scene to part 4, though, where he's buried with the machete and his mask on.
That's part 5.
Or part 5.
Yeah. Yeah, it's pretty funny.
Yeah, which I watched. Well, we won't get too off topic with that one, but because I watched 4 and 5 and 6. I watched those on the most recent Friday the 13th.
Oh yeah. The Tommy Jarvis.
Okay, now I don't feel so bad about saying part 4.
Yeah, but again, Frankenstein. Yeah, and then like the whole thing too at the end with the villagers and like they got their torches out, and I mean that's like one of those things like it's like sort of a cliche, or I guess cliche is the best word, but like you talk about there's always like on a cartoon or whatever they always use that thing about the villagers like chasing somebody around with torches. And yeah, that's kind of Frankenstein sort of started that, I guess. And it's like, here's you're watching the original, version of that.
Yeah, and I don't know I wonder if, like you were saying, how the image of Frankenstein that we always think of is Boris Karloff. You always think of that, or like a cartoony version of that, which is based off of that, or even the other one that again is based off of this one would be Herman Munster.
Yeah,
of course, just a little bit more of a bigger version of the same thing. But I always wonder if that was something that Universal did, or if in the original play that was the look he had in that play, or because I don't think they ever said in the book that he had a squared off head.
No, I think that was the design for that movie only.
Yeah, so it's always, and even when you watch, there's been a few things like we were just talking about before. The Mary Shelley's Frankenstein from whatever year that was, he had just like a regular head in that one, and then I think there was another kind of mainstream movie where he had the Frankenstein monster character had a regular head, but
it seems like when you see that, though, it doesn't seem right completely.
Oh, yeah, exactly. Yeah, you're like, that's rip off.
Right. Never fully. You got to see it like with the.
I think it was. What was that one from a couple years ago with Victor?
Oh, the Frankenstein, where he's like almost like an action hero.
No, not that one. The one with Harry Potter and stuff in it.
Oh, I don't know that one.
Yeah, was it called Victor Frankenstein? I don't remember. There was one with like the guy who played Professor X, the younger version of that. Man, I can't think of his name either. You would think for us being technically movie critics with this show that we would actually know what we're talking about sometimes.
No, we're winging it today.
But anyway, if I remember right in that one, the monster in that show was kind of a, yeah, like you said, like you see that and you're like, that's not the Frankenstein monster.
Yeah, and then another one they kept with the classic flat-headed look was the Monster Squad Frankenstein. Looked just like
Yep.
sort of obviously inspired by Universal.
Yeah, which that would be I'm surprised. We've talked about that before too. I'm surprised that they've never come around and rebooted that or remade it using the monster or the slashers from the 80s.
Well, I think it's been in like talks for a long time. They just never pulled the trigger or moved forward.
Well, anymore too. All the licensing crap. Nobody wants to give up their rights to anything anymore.
Right. So it'd be interesting to see what happens with that. So Frankenstein, I give it like 2 thumbs up for sure.
Oh yeah,
it's definitely a classic horror. It's definitely, again, it goes back to that whole that era where they really knew how to do atmosphere, and it really works so well in black and white too. It's just like it's that old, really old looking camera filming that they use, and with the black and white in the castle and the mad scientist laboratory and everything. It just it just works so well. You think Halloween, you think horror, you think the beginning. It's great. And one of the reasons too, like this new Mummy movie that Tom Cruise was in when they were trying to launch the Dark Universe, I think it fell flat was because They didn't have any of that. They had none of that background, none of that atmosphere. And when you think these classic monsters, that's really what you want to see. I mean, just like, you want to feel like you're watching Svengoolie shows.
Yeah, they definitely don't make them like they used to, which is kind of funny because we say that about these. Well, I mean, this movie is almost 90 years old,
Holy crap.
Crazy. Wow. I mean, we say that about the movies nowadays that are 40, 30 years old even. They don't make them like they used to. But of course, too, when you think about that, which, you had these Universal movies in the 30s and stuff that were great. And then when you got into like the 40s and 50s, then that's when all the real campy horror movies were coming out. All the invaders from space and whatever, mutant ants from Mars or whatever, all that weird stuff. And then that kind of evolved into like the whole Hammer movies and all that stuff that were still kind of campy and stuff. And then it didn't really get to where, even though there was a few things in that time period that came out that were great, Psycho and stuff like that, but then it didn't really evolve into what we consider real horror until, the mid 70s into the 80s. But then it took that turn in the 90s, and then it kind of corrected itself a little bit in the early 2000s. And then, in my opinion, for the most part, modern horror now, which is like the Purge movies and stuff, it's weird. It kind of goes through these cycles.
Yeah. Yeah, we're in a weird stage of horror for sure now. It's come a long way from, looking back at a Frankenstein in 1931, that's for sure.
All right, guys, so I think we'll wrap it up on Frankenstein. And this is going to be a short episode, just like the movie.
Yeah.